Honorable the Leader of the Opposition,
Honourable Speaker, Mr. President and fellow South Africans. In January 2019, a select group of business executives were invited to a dinner on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. At that dinner, the host stood up and described the term in office of South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma as 9 wasted years. And influential people who attended that dinner said that they were impressed with the forthrightness of the comment. According to one attendee, and I quote, "It made me think about how the country had been run in the last years. We lost some of the gains that we had," end quote. And who was the speaker at that dinner? It was none other than President Cyril Ramaphosa, talking about the administration of his ANC predecessor. As we look back now on that early period of the Ramaphosa presidency, through the lens of this year's State of the Nation address, we arrive at one inescapable conclusion: that you, Mr. President, are somehow guilty of something even worse than the thing that you once accused Zuma of. For if President Zuma presided over 9 wasted years, you, sir, have presided over 5 disastrous years. If you thought that we lost some gains under Zuma, then under this administration, we have gained only losses. To quote one of the ANC's favorite thinkers, Karl Marx, history repeats itself, first as tragedy and then as farce. And that is exactly what you have wrought on South Africa, Mr. President. What happened under Zuma was a tragedy, but what has happened under your watch is a farce. The new dawn was a false dawn. Ramaphosa was a delusion. Your supposed commitment to sweeping economic reform was hollow. Unemployment has skyrocketed from 36% to 43% since Mr. Ramaphosa became president. Murder has increased by 20% over the same period, with 70 people killed in our country every single day. And as we all know, the rolling blackouts have now become a daily feature of permanent life under the Ramaphosa era. In fact, when he became president in 2018, South Africa spent a total of 6 days under load shedding. We thought back then that we had hit rock bottom. Since then, it has gone up every single year. First to 22 days, then to 35 days, then to 48 days, and last year it grew to 157 days. Sadly, it looks like 2023 is going to smash all these despicable records. Already this year, we've had over 1,000 hours of consecutive load shedding and counting. Mr. President, you may not have realized it, but this year's SONA was actually your last chance to lead the country onto a fundamentally different and better path. Last Thursday, you spoke to a nation that had arrived on the banks of a great river. On this side of the river, behind us, lay the treacherous road we have walked for the past 3 decades under the ANC. This is the socialist approach that the party embarked upon in 1997, when they formally adopted the policy of cadre deployment in order to, and I quote, control every lever of the state, unquote. His party believes that if the state controls the economy, it will be better than the people controlling the economy through open markets. They believe that the best way to deliver affordable, reliable energy supply for the nation is for the ANC to keep full control of South Africa's energy production. They believe that the best way to provide affordable rail transport for the nation is to keep full control of the railways with the ANC. They believe that the best way to manage a pandemic is to centralize all control in a national command center for them to decide who must be locked down and who mustn't, who can work and who cannot. And that is why this road is marked by stage 6 load shedding that reaches into the homes of every single South African every single day. It's marked by failing public services, by hospitals that cannot treat the sick, by trains that cannot run, and by police service that can no longer keep us safe. These are no longer warnings about what will happen under the ANC's failed approach of centralized state control. This is now the daily reality of life in South Africa. Yet, as we stood on that riverbank last Thursday, we could look across to the other side. We saw a road extending to a fundamentally different and better future. But to get there, to turn our backs on decades of failed ANC policies, we first had to cross that great river, knowing that if we ever did get to the other side, the rushing torrent would ensure that we never, ever went backwards. On Thursday, a courageous leader who really cared about this nation would have had the head and the heart to admit that his party is wrong, that it is time to cross the Rubicon and embrace the opposite of socialism, which is power to the people. Now, make no mistake about it, South Africa was ready to cross that river. The men and women of this country are tired to their very core of the abuse that this ANC government has put them through. On last Thursday, we looked to you, sir, our president. We asked you to show us the way across the river, to unleash the power of the market to solve our electricity crisis, to get the incapable state out of the way of the incredible resourcefulness and creativity of the South African people, to put us on the road to socio-economic freedom that all of the world's prosperous nations have traveled. Because we don't want to rely on being resilient, we want to rely on being resourceful. We don't want to rely on meager social grants, we want to rely on our own jobs and businesses. We don't want to rely on your cadres, we want to rely on ourselves. And what did our leader do on that riverbank with the fate of our nation at stake? President Cyril Ramphosa could not cross the Rubicon. Even as our nation pleaded for him to do the right thing and to take us onto this hopeful new path on the other side of the great Rubicon River, he couldn't take his eyes off the rapids. Even as the people of South Africa raised their voice in unison and frustration, all he could do was stare, terrified at the challenge. Instead of leading us across the Rubicon at the SONA of this year, Mr. Ramphosa told us to turn around, to stay on this side of the riverbank, to double down on the same failed policies and the ANC approach of state control that has landed us in this terrible mess. Too weak, too indecisive, and too cowardly to take on the cadres, the compromised, and the vested interests in the political party that he leads. He turned his back on the Rubicon, he turned his back on us, and he turned his back on the only pathway that can save this country. Instead of getting the state out of the way of private electricity generation, he gave sweeping powers to the very same minister who abused those powers during the COVID crisis last year. Instead of deregulating and unleashing private sector electricity generation, he has centralized even more power in his super presidency. Instead of privatizing failed state-owned enterprises, he's created a massive new state-owned enterprise to provide fresh looting opportunities for the cadres. Instead of removing incompetent ministers of energy and public enterprises who block reform, he added yet another ministry to his already bloated cabinet. Mark this, by once again expanding and rather than shrinking the role of the state, the President has all but guaranteed that load shedding and all the other terrible crises visited on the people of South Africa by his government will only get worse. But a curious thing also happened last Thursday after the SONA. Mr. Ramphosa clearly believed that the people would simply follow him, as he told us to turn back away from the Rubicon. He took for granted that people would just oblige and follow him back down the road to decay and decline. He has gravely miscalculated. Instead of following him, the people have stayed put, their eyes firmly transfixed on the promise of prosperity and hope on the opposite shore. The response to President Ramphosa's SONA makes it clear that he has placed the party political interests of his own dying party ahead of the interests of the people of South Africa one too many times. By cowering from the Rubicon, he has lost the support of the country. And last Thursday will forever be remembered as the day that history overtook President Ramphosa. By failing to listen to the cries of the people and doubling down on the failed ideologies that caused the suffering, the government has deserted us. But that does not mean that we can't still cross this great river. Yes, Tumamina was an empty slogan. Yes, the new dawn was a cruel mirage. And yes, Palapala showed us who he really is. And yes, we too wonder, as he said, why he is still doing the job. Gave us the real impression that this job is nothing but a side hustle for him. Because it is now quite clear that President Ramphosa has failed. But you know what? Thanks to our democracy, we are never wholly dependent on one person. Our democracy offers us the way across the Rubicon. But there is a catch. Because now that the president has failed to lead us, we have to build a bridge across those raging waters ourselves at the next national elections. During his speech, the president claimed that we are defined by platitudes like hope and resilience. Wrong, Mr. President. We are a nation that should be defined by our commitment to a constitutional democracy. Because it is democracy that offers us a way out when all leaders have to offer is empty and hollow platitudes. And it's precisely for moments like this when the leader fails his nation that we have a democracy. If we want to get this country onto a better path before load shedding and the terrible policies and decline make it impossible to recover, it's time to use our democracy. And let there be no doubt, there is only one party that offers our country a realistic way across the Rubicon and onto a better path. While ANC-run municipalities collapse, there's only one party that is systematically fixing municipalities like Midvaal in Gauteng, Umgeni in KwaZulu-Natal, and Koga in the Eastern Cape. As cadre deployment and corruption rips apart the very fabric of the state, there's only one party that runs a clean and competent government in the Western Cape. And as power cuts get worse by the day, there is only one party working day and night in the province and the city to shield people from load shedding. That is why Cape Town became the first government in the country to start buying electricity directly from the open market, and with hundreds of megawatts of power still to come. That party And the only party to save South Africa is the Democratic Alliance. And so today, I stand before the people of our country not to offer you more idealistic dreams, bullet trains, smart cities, and empty talk of hope. We tried the idealism of the new dawn. It was a false dawn. So now we must try pragmatism. For that is what the DA offers our country. A credible, pragmatic, realistic set of solutions that will get our country working again and get us across that Rubicon once and for all. Where the ANC offers more of the same by assigning more power over our lives to the incapable state, the DA offers to give power back to the people where it belongs. Rather than seeking to control all the levers of power, the DA stands for something different. For liberal democracy, where power and economic decisions are decentralized into the hands of the people where it belongs. Accountability, non-racialism, commitment to the rule of law, and an inclusive social market economy that embraces the private and public sectors as partners, with zero tolerance for corruption. It is these timeless principles that have helped us turn around those municipalities and get this government in the Western Cape onto the path where it is now the best run provincial administration in the country. And by voting DA in 2024, we can bring this to bear at a national level. And let's be clear, the DA is the only game in town, because anybody who seriously wants to cross that Rubicon must understand the binary. The latest polling shows that we are just 10 percentage points behind the ANC. They've dropped to 37%, we're on 27%, and we are closing that gap. Support for them has crashed. And no matter how anyone spins it, our country faces a binary. Next year, a national government will either be an ANC-led coalition or it'll be a DA-led coalition. We will either have a yellow coalition trapped on the wrong side of that riverbank, suffering misery and poverty, or we will have a blue coalition led by the DA that leads us across the Rubicon towards a better and brighter future. Honourable Speaker, the people of South Africa know what needs to be done to fix the country. They are ready to embrace private electricity generation, to privatise failed state-owned enterprises, to replace the terrible race-based policies that only empower the connected elite with non-racial policies that are targeted towards lifting poor people out of poverty and into opportunity. The people of our country are ready to cross the Rubicon. And the good news is we can still do it. We're just going to have to do it without President Ramphosa. By uniting behind the DA next year, we can cross that Rubicon. We can leave behind the corrupt state-led paradigm for good. And South Africa, on the other side of the Rubicon, awaits a new country, where load shedding and corruption are a thing of the past, where quality education and healthcare are available to all, where millions of people can move out of poverty and into opportunity, and where all of us feel safe. And the truth is, the ANC is not going to lead us to that future. They are the past. The challenges we face are large, and yes, tough battles lie ahead of us. But outside this city hall and across the length and breadth of South Africa, there are millions of ordinary, hard-working citizens who are desperate for change. In the face of growing hardship inflicted by the government, these are the people who still get up every day to try and build a better life for them and their families. These are the people that we have alongside us. Together we can build a land of prosperity and opportunity, but we're going to need a government that's working for us, not against us. And the only way we can get there is by using our democracy next year to elect a DA government, A government with the courage to do what President Ramaphosa couldn't and cross that Rubicon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.